My mother had been dead for 11 days when my stepmother looked at my father and said, "You need to choose. Her or me." I was standing at the kitchen doorway, holding the coffee mug my mother used every morning. For a few seconds nobody moved. Then my father looked at me, and he said the words that completely changed my life. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you can't stay here anymore." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain refused to believe what I had just heard. 11 days. That was all it took. 11 days after I buried the woman who had spent 30 years protecting me, my own father was asking me to leave the house I had grown up in. My stepmother, Linda, folded her arms across her chest. She didn't look guilty. She looked satisfied. "Your father has made his decision," she said quietly. I stared at her, then at Dad. "Dad, Mom has been dead for 11 days. His eyes dropped toward the floor. "I know." "No," I whispered. "I don't think you do." I pointed toward the hallway. "My mother's pictures are still hanging on those walls. Her clothes are still in her closet. Her medication is still on the bathroom counter. You haven't even had time to grieve, and you're already choosing her over me." Dad's face tightened. Linda immediately stepped closer to him. And that's when I noticed something strange. She wasn't crying. She wasn't comforting him. She was watching me, almost like she had been waiting for this exact moment. I didn't know it then, but that night wasn't really about getting me out of the house. It was about getting me away from something my mother had left behind. Something Linda desperately wanted. And within 24 hours of being kicked out, I was going to discover a secret that would make me question everything that had happened before my mother's death. My name is Emily Carter, and I was 30 years old when my father chose my stepmother over me. But what he didn't know was that his decision would eventually cost him far more than losing his daughter. Because when I walked out of that house that night, I didn't leave empty-handed. I took one thing with me: my mother's old leather notebook. And inside that notebook was a truth my stepmother had spent years trying to hide. The night before Mom died, she had written one final message to me. I hadn't understood it at the time. Now I finally did. And it started with 6 words. "Emily, don't trust Linda anymore." I had spent the previous 11 days convincing myself that grief was making me suspicious. Maybe Linda was just overwhelmed. Maybe Dad was confused. Maybe I was being unfair. But when I saw those words again, everything inside me went cold. Because Mom hadn't written them months earlier. The date at the top of the page was only 3 days before she died. I sat on the edge of a cheap motel bed that night, reading the same sentence over and over. Don't trust Linda anymore. Why? What had Mom discovered? And why had she been afraid to tell me directly? My hands were shaking when I turned the page. There was another sentence. "If your father asks you to leave, don't fight him. Leave." Froze. What? I read it again. Then again. My mother had somehow predicted it. She knew there was a possibility my father would throw me out. She knew Linda would push him to do it. And she had specifically told me not to fight. Instead, she wanted me to leave. Because she believed I would find something once I was away from them. Something she couldn't safely tell me while she was alive. I turned the page. There was an envelope taped inside the notebook. My name was written across it in my mother's handwriting. Emily. My heart started pounding. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of my mother, my father, and Linda standing outside our house years ago. But there was something written on the back. Date. And underneath it, "The day your father lied to you." I stared at those words until my eyes filled with tears. My father had just kicked me out. My mother had warned me about Linda. And now I was holding proof that Dad had lied to me about something years before. But I still didn't know what. Then my phone buzzed. It was Dad. I almost ignored the call. Almost. Then I answered. His voice was barely a whisper. "Emily, where are you?" I didn't respond. He swallowed. Then he said something that made my entire body go still. "Linda doesn't know I'm calling you." I sat up straight. "What are you talking about?" There was silence. Then Dad said, "Your mother left something behind. Something Linda has been looking for." My grip tightened around the phone. "What?" Before he could answer, I heard Linda's voice in the background. "Who are you talking to?" Dad immediately hung up. I stared at the dark screen. For the first time since Mom died, I wasn't crying. I was angry. Because suddenly, being kicked out didn't feel like the end of my family. It felt like the beginning of the truth. And if Linda was willing to destroy my relationship with my father just to find whatever Mom had hidden, I was going to find it first. The next morning, I woke up with one thought burning through my mind. What had Mom hidden? I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Dad's voice. "Linda doesn't know I'm calling you." Then I remembered the photograph. The date written on the back. The words about my father lying to me. I pulled Mom's notebook from my bag and studied every page again. There had to be something I was missing. My mother wasn't the kind of person who wrote dramatic warnings without a reason. If she had taken the time to leave clues for me, she expected me to follow them. So I started with the date on the photograph. It was 9 years old. I searched through my phone for old pictures from that year. Then I remembered something. That was the year Dad told me they were refinancing the house. At the time, I hadn't cared. I was 21 and working 2 jobs. Dad had simply told me, "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. Your mother and I are handling it." But now I remembered Mom's reaction. She had looked nervous. And when I asked her what was wrong, she smiled and said, "Nothing you need to worry about." I suddenly felt sick. I opened the notebook again. Near the back, Mom had written several numbers. Count numbers. And one name. Lawyer. I stared at it for several seconds before searching the name online. The lawyer was still practicing. Called his office. A receptionist answered. "Good morning. How may I help you? My name is Emily Carter. My mother was Margaret Carter." There was a pause. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. I found some documents with your name in her notebook. I think she may have left something with your office." Another pause. This one felt different. "Are you currently at your mother's residence?" "No." "Where are you?" I hesitated. "I'm not there anymore." The receptionist lowered her voice. "Then you need to come here as soon as possible." My heart started racing. "Why?" "I can't discuss your mother's private matters over the phone." That was all she would say. I hung up and immediately called a rideshare. But before I left, I received another message. It was from my father. "Please don't go to anyone about your mother's papers." I stared at the screen. A minute later, another message arrived. "Linda is upset. She says you are making things worse." I almost laughed. I hadn't contacted Linda. I hadn't spoken to her. I hadn't done anything. Yet somehow she already knew I was looking. That was when I understood. Dad wasn't the one controlling the situation. Linda was. And Dad was too afraid or too weak to stop her. I reached the lawyer's office just before noon. The moment I walked inside, an older man stood up from behind his desk. "Emily." "Yes." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he closed the office door. "Your mother asked me to contact you only if something happened to her." My stomach dropped. What kind of something? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a locked drawer and removed a thick envelope. It had my name on it. My mother's handwriting. My hands began to tremble. "She told me your father might try to convince you that you had no legal claim to the house." I looked up. "What?" He placed several documents on the desk. "Emily, that house was not simply your father's property." I couldn't breathe. "What are you saying? Your mother owned 50%. I stared at him. "That's impossible." "No. What's impossible is that your father didn't know." I felt the room spin. My mother had been paying part of the mortgage for years. She had contributed to renovations. She had managed the finances. But Dad always told me the house belonged to him. The lawyer continued. "Your mother also established a trust." "A trust?" He nodded. And you're the beneficiary. I couldn't speak. He slid the final document toward me. This was supposed to be transferred to you after her death. My eyes moved across the page. Then I saw the number. My mother hadn't left me just memories. She had left me a substantial inheritance. But there was something else. A handwritten note was attached to the document. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately. If Linda tries to force Emily out, she is trying to reach the trust. My heart stopped. Linda didn't want me gone because she hated me. She wanted me gone because I was standing between her and my mother's money. But then the lawyer said something that changed everything. There's one more thing. He opened another file. Your mother changed her will 3 days before she died. I leaned forward. What did she change? He looked directly at me. She removed your father. My mouth fell open. Why? He pushed the document toward me. That's something you need to read yourself. I looked down. My mother's final will named me as the primary beneficiary. My father received nothing. Not the house. Not the investment accounts. Not the trust. Nothing. But there was a handwritten explanation attached. And the first sentence made my blood run cold. I am leaving my husband out because he has already made an agreement with Linda. I read it twice. Then a third time. An agreement. What agreement? The lawyer watched my expression. Your mother believed your father intended to transfer ownership of the house to Linda. He nodded. And she believed it was being done without your knowledge. I felt anger rise through me. So Dad knew. We don't know exactly what he knew. Yes, he did. I thought about the night before. His hesitation. His refusal to look at me. Linda standing beside him. The way she said, "Your father has made his decision." Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't an emotional decision. It was planned. They had been preparing to push me out. And my mother had discovered it before she died. I stood up. I need copies of everything. The lawyer nodded. But as I turned toward the door, my phone rang. Answered. His voice sounded desperate. Emily, where are you? At your lawyer's office. Silence. Then I heard him whisper. Linda knows. My heart pounded. What does she know? Dad took a shaky breath. She knows you found the documents. I looked at the lawyer. Then Dad said something I would never forget. Emily, please listen to me. Don't come back home. Why? Because Linda has already changed the locks. Closed my eyes. She had thrown me out. Changed the locks. And now she knew I had discovered the truth. But Dad wasn't finished. His voice cracked. There's something else I haven't told you. What? I wasn't the one who signed the house transfer. Froze. Then who did? Dad didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, Your mother. And then the call ended. For almost a minute I couldn't move. My father's last words kept repeating in my head. Your mother signed it. I looked at the lawyer. Is that true? He didn't answer immediately. That silence was enough to make my stomach twist. Finally he nodded. Yes. Your mother signed a document related to the property. Then why did she warn me about Linda? Because the document wasn't what your father thinks it was. I stared at him. What does that mean? He opened another folder. Inside was a copy of the property agreement. I read the first page. Then the second. And suddenly, I understood why Mom had been so careful. She hadn't transferred the house to Linda. She had placed her share into a protected trust. The document my father thought gave Linda control of the property actually prevented Linda from owning it. I looked up. Why would Mom do this? The lawyer leaned back. Because she knew what was coming. Those words hit harder than anything else. Mom knew. Before she died, she knew there was a possibility Dad would choose Linda over me. She knew Linda was trying to get control of the house. And she had quietly built a wall around everything she wanted me to have. But there was one problem. My father had apparently signed another document afterward. A document that wasn't legally valid. Linda had convinced him that my mother had agreed to give up her interest in the property. And Dad believed her. Or at least that's what he claimed. I sat there staring at the paperwork. Why didn't Mom tell me? The lawyer's expression softened. Because she was afraid. Afraid of Linda. He nodded. And possibly of your father. I felt my chest tighten. My father. The man who had held my hand at Mom's funeral. The man who had told me, "We'll get through this together." He had been hiding things from me. Maybe for years. The lawyer handed me one final envelope. "This is the most important thing your mother left." Opened it. There was a small USB drive inside. My name was written on it. Underneath, Mom had written, "Watch this when you are alone." My hands were shaking. What's on it? I don't know. You haven't watched it. No. Your mother specifically instructed me not to. Took the drive. For the first time since Mom died, I felt something other than grief. I felt determination. That evening I went back to my motel. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and connected the drive to my laptop. There was only one video. The file was dated 3 days before Mom died. Clicked it. My mother's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, much thinner than I remembered. But her eyes were clear. She looked directly into the camera. "Emily, if you're watching this, something has happened to me." My eyes immediately filled with tears. Mom took a breath. "I need you to listen carefully. Don't stop the video." I wiped my face. "I know your father loves you. At least I believe he did when we married. But something changed after Linda came into our lives." My heart started pounding. Mom continued. "Linda didn't enter this family because she loved your father." Froze. "She entered because she knew about the money." I stared at the screen. "What money?" Mom continued speaking. "Your father had been hiding financial problems from me. Linda found out about them. She offered to help him." My stomach dropped. But her help came with conditions. Mom looked down. She wanted access to our property and investments. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then Mom said something that made everything click. "Your father didn't choose Linda because he loved her more than you." He paused. "He chose her because he was afraid." Afraid. That word explained everything. Dad wasn't simply cruel. He was trapped by decisions he had made. But Mom wasn't finished. "Linda knows about the trust." My eyes widened. "She knows that after my death, you inherit everything protected under it. She also knows that if she can convince your father to remove you from the house, she can make you feel desperate enough to give up your claim." I leaned closer to the screen. Mom's voice became quieter. "Emily, don't do it." I swallowed. "Don't sign anything. Don't accept any money from them. Don't give them the house." Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. "If your father kicks you out, let him." I stared at her. "Let him." Mom nodded on the screen. "Because once you're out, Linda will believe she has one." A small smile appeared on Mom's face. "And that's when she will make her biggest mistake." I stopped breathing. Mom knew. She had planned for this. She had anticipated Linda's behavior. And suddenly I understood why Mom had told me not to fight when Dad kicked me out. She wanted Linda to believe I was powerless. The video continued. "I have left evidence with my lawyer. Evidence of Linda's financial dealings with your father." My heart started racing. If Linda tries to take control of the house, the evidence will become important. Mom leaned closer to the camera. "Emily, there is one thing I need you to remember." He paused. "Don't revenge yourself by becoming cruel." I started crying. Revenge yourself by becoming impossible to destroy. The video ended. I sat there in silence. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Your mother would be disappointed in what you're doing." I stared at it. Another message arrived. "Stop digging into the past." Then a third. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I didn't reply. Instead I took screenshots. I saved everything. Then I forwarded the messages to the lawyer. 10 minutes later he called. Emily, don't respond to that number. Do you know who it is? I have a pretty good idea. Who? He hesitated. Someone connected to Linda. My heart pounded. Then he said, Emily, there's another reason your mother wanted you to have that evidence. What? The financial records show Linda wasn't just taking money from your father. He paused. She was taking money from your mother too. I went completely still. What? She had access to one of your mother's accounts. Felt sick. How? The lawyer answered quietly. Your father gave her access. Closed my eyes. This was bigger than I had imagined. Linda hadn't simply manipulated Dad. She had been stealing from Mom. And if the records proved it, the woman who had celebrated my eviction might soon have a much bigger problem. But then the lawyer said, there's one final document. What document? Your mother's original medical records. My heart stopped. Why would those matter? He lowered his voice. Because there are inconsistencies in the dates. I couldn't breathe. Are you saying? I don't know yet. He paused. But your mother's death may not have happened the way your father told you. I stared at the wall. For 11 days, I had believed I was grieving a normal death. Now I was wondering if someone had been hiding the truth from me. And if Linda had been involved. Then getting kicked out of my father's house wasn't the worst thing she had done. It might have been the thing that finally exposed her. The lawyer's words followed me through the entire night. Your mother's death may not have happened the way your father told you. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. I wanted to believe Linda had simply manipulated my father. I wanted to believe Dad was weak, confused, and grieving. But the more I uncovered, the harder that became. The next morning I met the lawyer again. He placed my mother's medical records on the desk. Emily, I need you to understand something, he said. An inconsistency doesn't mean someone caused her death. I know. Good. Because we cannot accuse anyone without evidence. He nodded. He showed me the records. There were several unusual entries. One medication had been recorded differently on 2 separate documents. A prescription had been refilled earlier than expected. And one signature didn't match the doctor's usual signature. None of it proved murder. But it proved something else. Someone had been careless. And that someone had access to Mom's medical information. The lawyer had already contacted the proper authorities. Then he showed me another document. It was a financial statement. Linda had transferred money from an account connected to my mother. Not once, not twice, repeatedly, over several months. My hands tightened around the papers. How much? The lawyer told me. I couldn't believe it. Linda had taken enough money to change everything. And Dad had known about at least some of it. That was when I finally understood why he had chosen her. Linda had leverage over him. She knew his financial secrets. She knew about the property. She knew about the trust. And Dad was terrified that if Linda went down, he would go down with her. So he sacrificed me, his own daughter. 'Cause he thought I was easier to lose. I wasn't. That afternoon I did something Mom had told me to do. I stopped trying to get my father back. Instead, I started protecting myself. The lawyer filed the necessary paperwork to enforce my mother's trust. The house couldn't simply be transferred. The accounts couldn't be emptied. And Linda couldn't touch the assets my mother had protected for me. Then came the part one had been waiting for. The lawyer contacted Dad. He told him everything. Dad called me that night. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Emily. His voice sounded broken. I know. I said nothing. I know what Linda did. Still nothing. I should have protected you. I looked out the motel window. Yes. He started crying. I was afraid. So was Mom. Silence. Then Dad whispered. Your mother knew. She knew everything. I heard him breathing heavily. Emily, please come home. Closed my eyes. No, I want to fix this. You had 11 days. He didn't answer. You had 11 days to choose me, I continued. And you chose Linda. I made a mistake. No, Dad. My voice was calm. That wasn't one mistake. It was a decision you made every day. He started crying harder. But this time I didn't comfort him. Because for years, I had been the daughter who tried to keep everyone happy. Not anymore. The following week, the investigation moved forward. Linda was confronted about the financial transfers. First, she denied everything. Then the records were shown to her. He changed her story. Then she blamed Dad. Then she claimed my mother had given her permission. But the documents told a different story. The messages told a different story. And eventually, the evidence from my mother's lawyer became impossible to explain away. Linda had been secretly moving money. She had pressured Dad into signing documents. She had tried to manipulate ownership of the house. And she had deliberately pushed me out because she believed removing me would make the trust easier to control. But there was one final piece. The messages she had sent me. The threats. The warnings. The attempt to intimidate me into stopping the investigation. Those messages became part of the evidence too. As for my mother's death, the authorities continued investigating the medical inconsistencies. I refused to make accusations without proof. That mattered to me. Because Mom had told me not to become cruel. She had told me to become impossible to destroy. And I did. Months later, the truth finally came out. Linda had committed financial fraud. She had manipulated my father and illegally accessed funds that didn't belong to her. My father admitted that he had helped her hide some of the financial problems. He lost the house. He lost Linda. And most painfully for him, he lost me. But I didn't lose myself. I used the trust my mother left me to buy a small house of my own. The first night I slept there, I placed Mom's photograph beside my bed. For the first time since her death, I felt peaceful. Then I noticed the old leather notebook sitting on the table. I opened it one last time. There was something I hadn't seen before. A tiny folded piece of paper had been tucked inside the back cover. I unfolded it. Only one sentence was written there. Emily, one day you'll understand that losing people who don't value you is not the same as losing your family. Cried. But these weren't the same tears I had cried in that motel. These were different. They were tears of relief. My father had chosen Linda. He had kicked me out. He thought he was removing a problem from his life. He didn't realize he was pushing me toward the truth. And Linda thought taking my mother's house would make her powerful. Instead, her greed exposed everything. I never got the revenge I imagined when I was sitting alone in that motel room. I didn't scream at Linda. I didn't destroy her. I didn't beg my father to come back. I simply let the truth do what anger never could. It destroyed every lie they had built their lives around. Today I still miss my mother. Probably always will. But I no longer think of the night Dad kicked me out as the night I lost my family. I think of it as the night I finally stopped begging people to love me. And if there's one thing my mother's death taught me, it's this. Sometimes the person who throws you out thinks they've taken everything from you. They don't realize you may be walking away with the one thing they can never take. Your freedom. So if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, remember this. Don't destroy yourself trying to punish them. Build a life they can no longer control. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't watching someone lose everything. It's watching them realize they lost you, while you became everything they thought you could never become.